Hello and welcome to new and returning viewers. In an earlier video, I did mention a project that I had completed in grade 13, when we had such things like that here in Ontario. It was my culminating project for my geography course, and thankfully I had a very open-minded teacher who allowed me to do the project on the occult. When I made the earlier video, I mentioned that I would be reading over the project again, which I did yesterday, and it was a very interesting read, and there were a few things that definitely stood out. In particular, some of the areas where my thoughts have changed. This particular project was 21 pages long, and it was all handwritten because when I was going to high school, we didn't have computers in all the classrooms. We didn't have cell phones or any of that type of thing. I didn't have a typewriter, so it was all handwritten. That's a sign of the changing times. When I wrote this assignment, it was called The Occult. If I were to do this assignment again today, I likely would have called it the paranormal, which is the much more common term that people now use for the different subjects that I covered. As part of my assignment, I had to include a table of contents. So the subjects that I covered, I started with a preface. I did an introduction. Then I talked about extrasensory perception. I included a chart. I talked about reincarnation, UFOs, and space people. Another change, I would now have just said extraterrestrials. I also included a chart. I talked about the occult, then supernatural experiences, Ouija board, God, the devil, and spirits, and I wrote a conclusion. The charts were included because I did a survey of 48 people to get their ideas and opinions about the occult and different things that were happening in the small town where I grew up. On page 1, in the beginning, there was God. But was he truly alone? Some feel that others may have also existed. For example, the angels and demons may have already existed. However, this question may not be answered to everyone's satisfaction, which links it to other topics involving the occult. Through the essay, the topic of the occult is explored. Although the complete answers cannot be given, a few theories can be put forward. I wrote this assignment back in 1978, may have been 1979. What I find interesting is that I didn't actually include the date anywhere in my assignment. I mention that because now, especially when I'm reading or making notes, I make a point of dating it, whether it's the day that I started reading it, that type of thing. So, like I say, I'm quite surprised I didn't do that. Now, in the introduction, I also go on to say, the occult covers a large area of topics. It covers ESP to ghosts, UFOs to reincarnation. In the past, the occult was a forbidden topic. If you knew anything about unnatural happenings, you were considered a witch. Because people didn't understand certain aspects of nature, they became frightened by it and tortured and killed innocent people. For example, in the past, if someone had ESP, they kept it hidden for fear of being burned as a witch. Although today things have changed a great deal, there are parts of the occult which are still not accepted. For example, scientists do not believe that ghosts exist. It seems there's no scientific method to determine whether a ghost exists or not. Therefore, the scientists conclude that if it cannot be proven, it does not exist. For this reason, someone may have an experience with the supernatural world, but dismiss it because science states that it is not real. There are people who believe in the occult, but prefer to see it in action. Usually these people learn by their mistakes. They dabble in the occult and realize too late that the occult is not a toy. Many books have been written about such people. For example, Psychic Summer and the Demonologist. Things have changed somewhat since I wrote that. Unfortunately, there are some things that have not. In particular, this concept of witches being dangerous, and that is still sadly being pushed forward and reinforced by paranormal investigators. Part of it, I think, is due to they don't actually research some of the stories. So as soon as the big W gets dropped, there's the automatic assumption that, well, if there's a witch involved, it must have been a dark one. So in that regard, sadly, no, things haven't changed since I wrote this essay decades ago. One thing that has changed somewhat are the comments in terms of scientists. Now, unfortunately, many of them still will not get anywhere near the subject areas that, as I say, now tend to fall into what's called the paranormal versus what years ago would have been referred to as the occult. Some of the reasons scientists don't get involved aren't related to the drama-rama or the fact that anyone can call themselves a paranormal investigator. It doesn't require any training or any type of credentials. The reason scientists won't get involved has to do with the challenges and competition for funding, trying to get grants. And if they're going to put through a proposal for that type of work and money, they want to be sure that there's something on the other side of it that will continue to be of benefit and that will, for some of them, not all of them, in turn mean continued income and credibility and credentials from that type of work. So it's not just that some don't believe in the paranormal or think it's a bunch of woo-woo, hocus-pocus nonsense. It comes down to the reality of when you're competing with hundreds or thousands of other scientists for a limited amount of dollars, then what you're going to put forward as a proposal is something that the funding bodies are going to take an interest in looking into. There are a group of scientists known as parapsychologists who do study various parts of the paranormal. There are a number of different organizations worldwide. I know we have some here in Canada. They typically look at things like telepathy and psychokinesis because those are abilities and skills that can be tested for in a laboratory. So people may volunteer to do the test. There are certain things they put into place to ensure credibility, reliable results, trying to eliminate numerous variables so that once the study's completed, they're sure of the results that they're getting. So things have changed a little bit in terms of, as I say, when I wrote this essay. As I said, I did a survey of 48 people to pull together my data and information. The majority of people who took the survey were students, but I also had some teachers who shared results as well. On page 4, I'm talking about extrasensory perception. Extrasensory perception is often referred to as ESP. ESP is the ability to see into the future. It also involves the past. For example, some people gifted with ESP can find killers or lost pets. Even scientists accept ESP to a point. There are special research centers which are developed to determine whether people really have ESP. One test involves 5 cards. One person concentrates on a card while the person being tested tries to determine which card is being concentrated on. From my survey, I found that 60% of the people believed ESP is a reality. One person suggested that women's intuition is the same as ESP. The suggestion may be correct, for it is well known that the majority of clairvoyants are women. The chart that I provided was then divided into those who believed in ESP and whether their spiritual beliefs were connected to that. I finished that section by saying, to conclude, the topic of ESP seems to have a strong background. ESP is gaining acceptability in the scientific field because it can be proven with research. However, a number of questions still remain to be answered. Questions like, why doesn't everyone develop ESP? Can ESP change fate, or does it only delay it? Do animals or only humans have ESP? Some of those questions still need an answer. It's interesting that I didn't mention specifically J.B. Rhine of Duke University, who actually began his studies into telepathy and psychokinesis back in the 1920s. When I realized that the other day as I was reading through something else, and it occurred to me, that was 100 years ago, and we're still asking the same questions without conclusive proof one way or the other. It truly is a bit mind-boggling when you consider all the technology, all the advancements that have happened since J.B. Rhine began his work, and yet still here we are with is it real or isn't it, and no closer to the truth. To me, that's very unfortunate when you consider we have now 8 billion, yes, billion with a B, on this planet. So with that many people and with so many different resources and technology available, surely there must be some way to come up with some clear, concise answers to what is extrasensory perception? Do people have psychokinesis? I'll certainly get into talking more about psychokinesis, specifically when I ever talk about poltergeist, because according to the definition accepted by parapsychologists, a poltergeist is generated by an individual and it involves psychokinesis. It is not done consciously. It may be short term. Quite often it has to do with adolescence and some type of intense, strong emotion, could be trauma, and it does also occur with adults. But again, I really want to stress the point that poltergeist and psychokinesis go together. Reincarnation is the ability to return to the earth after death. By this I mean coming back to life as another human. There have been a number of documented cases where children are taken to a village they've never seen, and yet the child recognizes streets, houses, and even people. Many of the cases occur in India, where belief in reincarnation and karma are very strong. The Hindu religion is based on such beliefs. According to the religion, throughout your life, you are to try to better yourself. If you succeed, you travel to a higher spiritual plane after your death. Therefore, throughout your life, you strive to reach spiritual perfection. When you reach the top plane of the spiritual level, you become one with others who have also reached perfection. After this point, you have no reason to return to the earth and become a highly evolved being with vast stores of knowledge. According to my results, and this is interesting, 38 out of the 48 did not believe in reincarnation. I would be very curious to be able to go back to that small town and now do a survey of 48 people and see what, if anything, would have changed in terms of those results. Because, of course, now with the internet, if you've looked into anything with the paranormal or any of the subjects I'm talking about, you're well aware that not only are books more accessible than they ever were in the past, but you have all these websites, YouTube channels, TikTok videos, and yes, I'm shaking my head because I'm not a TikTok person. But my point is, so much of this now is being discussed. It's out in the open. It's no longer something that people are afraid or nervous about talking about. Well, depending on where you live, I guess there's still some areas that you couldn't openly talk about it. But my point is, I would be very interested in knowing how much things have changed in terms of compared to back in the late 1970s when 38 out of 48 did not believe in reincarnation. I'm very curious to know if that number has gone up. I concluded that section with, I feel reincarnation to be a definite possibility. To me, it seems there must be something after death. After all, the human soul must have a purpose. Why not strive for perfection to be one with God? Now, one thing that has changed for me since I've written this is that I think rather in terms of God, I would say a creative source or divinity. And it isn't that I don't believe in God. I truly believe there is some, I don't know whether to say energy or spirit or presence or dimensional being. I truly believe there is some. If you're familiar with AA or NA, it is referred to as a higher power. For reasons I'm not going to get into because it's way off topic, the Roman Catholic Church and I parted ways many decades ago. And that's based on my personal experiences and as a kid just going, how does this stuff happen when there's this presence up there? So although I left that particular path behind, after I took a religious studies course in university when I was working on my degree, I found it very fascinating to learn about different spiritual paths, how different people look at the same concept of a higher being, a higher power, but just have different ways of expressing it and living it. So for me, the big change is walking your walk, not just talking your talk. What I mean by that is, for me, spirituality is something you live, you breathe, and it's every single day. Whether that's, seeing a bird and being grateful for seeing the bird, understanding, all of creation is important. If you've seen my earthing videos, you know exactly what I mean, because I'm one of those people who takes forever to do my yard work, mostly because if I come across a worm or a spider or any insect, I will stop, cover up the worm when I've finished in that area. I make sure that the little spider, and if she has an egg or not, has moved along to a spot I'm not going to disrupt her again. To me, all of that is not just doing yard work and not just getting my hands in the dirt and connecting with the earth. That's all part of my personal belief and honoring a higher source, because we're all interconnected, from the tiniest little ant to the biggest mountain. We all have a part to play. We're all interconnected. We all, by our choices and our actions, have ripple effects that impact other people, other species, even if we don't see it and we're not aware of it. For me, it's living what you believe in a day-to-day manner. And that's just my thing. And it doesn't work for everyone. I have no issue with people who are still, within the Roman Catholic Church or any other church for that matter. I'm one of those people who firmly believes if it works for you, then that's the important thing. What I have a problem with are the my way or the highway, and it's okay to harm other humans if you don't believe what I believe. To me, that contradicts every single thing I have read about any spiritual path. I get that people use some kind of backward clause for it, but to me, that commandment of thou shalt not kill is pretty much what it says. Thou shalt not kill. The topic of reincarnation, again, unlike when I completed this report in the late 1970s, I have since read a number of studies by, I believe it's Dr. Ian Stevenson, and it had a lot to do with reincarnation and previous lives. I've also read Destiny of Souls by Dr. Newton. He's a hypnotist and has worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients, and I found his work to be very interesting and thought-provoking. So I enjoyed going through my old assignment because it made me realize all the different work and subjects that I've continued to look at since I initially wrote this. The next subject that I covered is UFOs and space people. UFOs are unidentified flying objects. They are believed to be spaceships from other worlds. Since the beginning of man, UFOs have been sighted. The ancient Greeks saw them. It's believed that the gods the Greeks referred to were really extraterrestrials. The reason for this being the way the Greeks referred to them. They spoke of the gods as superhumans. There are stories of Greeks actually meeting their gods. Some of the stories even tell of gods mating with humans. Could this mean our race is really a combination of two? We have no definite proof, but numerous books have been written on the subject by well-known authors. UFO sightings did not stop with the Greeks. There's mention of bright lights and unidentified flying objects in the Bible. For direct references, see the books written by Eric von Daniken. Today, the phenomena continues. The list of witnesses is countless. Many of the witnesses have been people in high positions and considered reliable. Because of the numerous sightings, the American government began Project Blue Book. The main goal of the project was to prove or disprove the existence of UFOs. Unfortunately, the project was dropped with no definite conclusions. Some believe the project is still operating, but is being kept from the public because of certain discoveries. A movie, Hangar 19, was based on such a theory. The movie suggested the government had found a spaceship, but had kept it hidden. The next question seems obvious. If UFOs exist, who do they belong to? Someone must be controlling them. Perhaps they're space people. Another name for space people are extraterrestrials. It is assumed they come from another world, perhaps one in our solar system. They may even come from another galaxy. Some believe these beings visited the Earth centuries ago. It's even been suggested that they're responsible for starting the human race as we know it. Another theory suggests that they are merely scientists and explorers out to discover what the Milky Way galaxy has to offer. Personally, I feel other civilizations do exist. The universe is vast and continually growing. Therefore, if one world develops life, then why can't others? However, there are a number of questions which must still be answered. For instance, will we ever know the truth? What do these beings look like? Are their intentions friendly? Does the government know more than they admit? The questions could go on indefinitely. Perhaps before the year 2000, we may even learn a few of the answers. That paragraph gave me a huge chuckle as it is now November 2023 and there are no definitive answers to the questions that I posed. It also made me chuckle because obviously before I had written this assignment, I had read Chariots of the Gods by Erich von Däniken. I just read that again in the last few months, and I'll be doing a look at that particular work in an upcoming video. I'm not so sure, and I know von Däniken is a very controversial individual. Some say he didn't do his research properly and that he just jumped to conclusions. Others take his work as totally valid and they fully accept it. Another book that I had recently read, Origins of the Gods, has a foreword by von Däniken and mentions him, so he's definitely still around. When I was writing this, I hadn't heard of Zecharia Sitchin. I wouldn't hear of Zecharia for at least another 30 years. Wow, it makes me feel old, just that. Anyway, I hadn't heard of Zecharia. I just, a couple of weeks ago, finished his 6-volume series called The Earth Chronicles. And that involves the 12th planet, because he, of course, still includes Pluto. It involves the Anunnaki and their having been involved with the development of the human race and genetics and a number of different theories. So reading this section was very interesting. Another author that I was familiar with prior to writing this assignment was Brad Steger and his Gods of Aquarius. So it's interesting how I was reading them back in the 70s and I'm now revisiting them in 2023. Another change from this assignment, although some people still use the term UFOs as in unidentified flying object, which to me is an accurate term, but for some people, they decided it now has to be UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. The occult. In the dictionary, Occult is defined as hidden, secret, beyond human understanding of such alleged mystic arts as astrology. And sorry, I'm kind of laughing at that one. Witchcraft may also be included. Oh, how things have changed since I have written this. The topics discussed so far can also be included. They all seem to be beyond human understanding. No human has yet been able to decipher the secret of ESP, nor has anyone written a book on experiences of life while in the spiritual plane. Also, there have been no broadcasts or interviews with extraterrestrials. Yet this does not prove they do not exist. It only proves that humans still have a great deal to study and learn. Like UFOs, witches have been in existence since time immemorial. Natives today still have witch doctors. It is assumed that witch doctors have the power to heal. But like most things, witchcraft has an evil side as well. There are two categories of witches: the white witch and the black. White witches are assumed to help mankind. They may aid man with anything from love potions to herbal medicines. On the contrary, the black witch is considered detrimental to humans. The black witch is usually responsible for death or illness. The witch usually has a favorite, such as a black cat. Black witches are associated with evil and curses. Ghosts are what remain after a human dies. In other words, it's a human soul. Usually the ghost travels away from Earth. However, if a person is killed violently or dies and is worried about someone, it will become trapped in a plane close to Earth. The closeness of the plane does not allow them to communicate with humans. In order to get their message across, they must have a medium or clairvoyant act as a transmitter. It seems beliefs have changed. In the past, innocent people were burnt as witches. People strongly believed in witchcraft and its powers. However, from the results, it's obvious witchcraft has lost its power in modern society. There's definitely a lot that has changed between those two pages. So the big change for me, as I already discussed when I was talking about the reincarnation, is about that spiritual path. There is sadly still discrimination. In this report, I only talked about white and black witches because at that time, that was all I knew. Over the decades, and certainly since my religious studies course when I first read a book called The Spiral Dance by Starhawk, that was my introduction into witchcraft and Wicca. There are so many different paths that fall under that umbrella, and they all fall under the umbrella of being pagan. So is every witch and Wiccan a pagan? Yes. Are all pagans witches or Wiccans? No. It includes a whole wide range of different beliefs under their own different umbrellas, which is no different than Christians. You have Baptists and Protestants, and even Catholicism has different sectors and groups. So there's just so many different paths out there. The one path that I've taken an interest in because of my interest in essential oils, nature, runes, connecting with the earth. So I've read and studied a lot about what is known as greencraft, and that focuses on specifically working with nature, being in tune with all of those gifts. Plants, animals, fur, feather, mineral. So you have crystals, that type of thing. Am I a witch? No. I don't have a name for my path. Like other people who have wandered and checked things out, there have been different names. Over years, there have been different things that have fit. There are some that don't fit anymore. Do I know some people who are witches? Yes. And to be honest, they are lovely people. They're not out to woo-woo, do dangerous things to themselves or anyone else. And it's why I tend to get a very big bugaboo when I see these paranormal investigators using the big W. The next part that I included in my assignment were supernatural experiences. So the question that I asked was for people to share if they'd had anything happen to them that they would consider, again, as I said, now we would call it paranormal. Back then we used other terms. So someone had mentioned to me they had a clock that was still ticking when the hydro was off, a radio that changed stations in the middle of the night. Some had had UFO sightings. Someone had the feeling of a presence when they were at their grandfather's gravesite. Another individual had told me about their brother living in a haunted house. And someone else had a cousin who had almost drowned and had seen another world and didn't want to be brought back. You've read anything about out-of-body experiences or the near-death experiences, a number of people have said they didn't want to come back. They were sent back because they still had something to do, that type of thing. So that is, again, some confirmation of different events. Another person shared that her mother had a communication from her father prior to his passing. The thing about that story is that the mother was living here in Canada, her father was in Holland. And again, that isn't the first example of something like that I've come across, especially when I've been reading different ghost stories or different books by clairvoyants or mediums. As I stated in the introduction, the survey had been taken seriously. The conclusion on this one definitely made me laugh. I feel the questions were helpful in the essay and made me realize the supernatural is not restricted to the British Isles. And I'm laughing because a number of the channels that I follow are from the United Kingdom. Typically, especially back then, when you were hearing the ghost stories, you would think of the United Kingdom. You have all the castles and the old structures and the history. In fact, a number of books that I have about ghosts are the United Kingdom. So it's kind of funny that all those years ago, I would make that kind of a comment. And I have to say, I very much do appreciate my viewers and subs from the United Kingdom. And it's fascinating to have conversations about different things going on in our respective countries. Ouija boards. Ouija boards were at one time available in stores. Now they're extremely difficult to find. Ouija boards have letters, numbers, and the words yes and no on them. They're thought to have the ability to tell the future and answer questions. Obviously, things have changed because Ouija boards are still very much around, easily available both on and offline shopping. When I was reading this essay yesterday, that part about the board telling the future caught me by surprise because I remember commenting as I was doing the book review for Bellwether that the Ouija board was thought to tell the future. And I remember asking the question, did people think Ouija boards told the future, or they're a form of spirit contact? So turns out even I thought they told the future way back when. Ouija is a spirit which is thought to be evil. There's a reason for this. The Ouija is a receptor for spirits and can attract evil as well as good. Because the spirit is not visible, there's no way to determine the spirit's nature. It's thought many hauntings are caused by playing with a Ouija board. An evil spirit may answer the questions but pose as a good spirit. Therefore, it would gain access to the family and its trust. By having the family trust it, the spirit may be invited into the home and then begin to destroy the home and the family. One example of this is the Donovan case, related by Ed Warren in The Demonologist. It was interesting reading that, one, because I don't remember reading Ed Warren's The Demonologist, but I certainly knew who Ed and Lorraine Warren were. Also, it talks about, the spirit can either be good or evil. Another thing that comes up with Ouija boards, particularly now, some assume that they're portals to another dimension. So again, if you're just dabbling or playing with them, what you're actually doing is opening a portal. And if you don't close the board when you're finished the session, then things can still come through, or so the thought is. And as I was reading this, because throughout different parts I mentioned my survey results, which I've kind of skipped as I've been reading this, but I do remember the individual who had told me about someone who had a Ouija board, burned it, and the board was screaming. Now, had it been anyone but this particular individual who told me the story, I would have thought it was a load of hooey. But the person who told me the story wasn't someone who would make things up. She was a very serious, down-to-earth, spiritual individual. So I have to say that story totally creeped me out. I finished the section with, the question still remains, what makes the board move? Is it the human aura or something beyond our understanding? Now, I've read a number of different things about the Ouija board. Actually, I just mentioned it in a video when I was talking about Worker in the Light and George Newry. I've also come across information about it when I was reading Paranormality by Professor Weissman, and he mentions about the involuntary movement of fingers, because you're to put your hand lightly on the planchette, and although people may not be intentionally trying to move it, I mean, some do because they think it's hilarious, but for some who are being genuine and trying to figure it out, their hands involuntarily move, which is what moves the planchette, or so it is described in Paranormality. Would I ever use one? Absolutely not. To me, it's because I'm not really sure of the ripple effect and the consequences of that item. Do I think it's a portal to either another dimension or another sphere? I don't know. Because there are no conclusive answers, and again, because of that ripple effect, the one thing I do agree with is you don't know who or what you're contacting. Now, granted, the same could be said for paranormal investigations and just going into a building and calling out to spirit. Again, you can't see them. To see an apparition is rare, so I guess for whatever reason, I don't have a problem with people trying to figure out the paranormal and reaching out to ghost or spirit or dimensional beings if that's what they are, because we don't really know. There's just something about the board, could be because of my own experience as a kid. I'm just personally not comfortable with it. Plus, I know years ago when there was this thing called Yahoo and message boards, I lost count of the number of people who would show up into the groups, had played with the board, and then had a bunch of problems. So I personally have nothing to do with them. God, the devil, and spirits. In my survey, I asked if a confrontation occurred between God and the devil, who would win? As I expected, the majority stated that God would win. However, the people may have different reasons for answering as they did. Some may have answered for religious beliefs, others because it was expected, and others because they felt good should triumph over evil. This sentence made me laugh. It seems that even in our modern times, it's hilarious now when I see how much the world has changed. I mean, the fact that I'm sitting here talking to a machine that's recording my image, at this time, that was Saturday morning cartoons, the Jetsons, science fiction. And yet, here it is, reality. So that line just cracks me up. Spirits are one with ghosts and the soul. All three are believed to be what remains after a human dies. But it's unknown if the soul carries the characteristics of the body it once occupied. Once this is determined, if it can be discovered, we will know what to expect of people when they die, and strange occurrences begin in their former home. There's an interesting point because there's very different views on that. Not just in terms of are humans the only ones with souls, and are they the only ones who come back as ghosts? Or do animals and other creatures, beings come back as well? There's also the concept of, are you the same in spirit ghost form as you were in human form? Some people say if you were evil or good in this life, that's who or what you are as spirit. I tend to think you change in spirit form. One, because I do believe in reincarnation. So you have all those other life experiences. Who you are in this material now is this one specific personality. But if, as I believe, your purpose for a life is life lessons, moving forward on a spiritual evolutionary path, then it only makes sense that once you leave this physical personality, I would hope you become a higher, more enlightened spirit. So you wouldn't be the same person in spirit as you were in your physical life, if that makes sense. Perhaps one day the confrontation will actually take place. Then and only then will the answer be known. For the human race's sake, God will win. If he does not, the race is doomed, and the extraterrestrials will have no one to study. They may even get involved in the fight. If you've watched the series Supernatural, which I have 3 times, season 1, 215, they of course keep talking about, and that's one of the big issues, the difference between God and the devil, Sam and Dean, the big fight for who gets control of the earth. That also comes up, and yes, I'm a big Star Wars fan. Of course, you have the Jedi and the Sith. That also is all about, which force is stronger, the good or the dark side. So that theme comes up over and over and over again. I finish off my essay. In conclusion, the survey was a success and many interesting points were learned. One being that when it comes to the occult, religion plays a small role. Many people seem to make up their minds on fact rather than religion. It seems as though the essay is a question waiting to be answered. Why do some people have ESP skills? Is reincarnation a reality? Do UFOs and extraterrestrials exist? Are witches and ghosts a reality? Does the Ouija board have powers? Who will win the confrontation? The above questions may be answered soon, or they may never be answered. We have no choice but to wait and see what the future holds. Or do we? I'm happy to say that I got an A on my assignment, and it was probably one of the projects that I enjoyed doing the most. Obviously, I was happy with the assignment and the topic because I've hung on to it for literally decades. There are a number of things that for me have changed since I've written that report. As I've already mentioned, my view on witches and witchcraft, which are not the paranormal. It is a spiritual path that millions of people follow. My view on ghosts have also changed because I don't think it's just humans that go on to spirit ghost form. So having now read the report again in 2023, because it's been a long time. I know I've read it a few times over the years, and it's been decades since I wrote it. So it definitely gave me some good chuckles. It made me realize, much like the fact that J.B. Rhine did his research 100 years ago, there are still so many unanswered questions. The questions I posed in that assignment, there isn't a single one that I could definitively say, yes, now we know this. Yes, this is conclusive. Particularly in the area of UFOs/UAPs, which have, of course, now become popular in the news again in the last while, between different governments saying things, different records finally being, what is it called when that word when other people can see them, declassified. So there's so much going on, but in terms of do we have specific answers? Unfortunately, not yet. In one section, I was talking about the planes rather than what we now call dimensions. And again, growing up, it was science fiction, parallel universes, different dimensions. That was the stuff of Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein, not everyday scientific fact. But again, here we are, and dimensions are now considered a reality, and you have string theory. Parallel universes are considered a reality. They're still trying to figure out how to explain how all of that works. So there have definitely been some changes there. Now, will figuring that type of thing out lead to some answers about the paranormal, ghosts, spirits, dimensional beings? Hopefully. Will it happen anytime soon? Probably not. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane and the occult, and how some of the things have certainly changed for myself in terms of what I consider paranormal, questions yet to be answered. I may keep that report handy as I start going through all my books and putting information and different things together. If you found this video to be of interest or of benefit, be sure to give that like button a little tickle. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Give me a little thumbs up if you've made it this far into the video. If you enjoy bookish content, or you enjoy silly cat videos or nature videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload content that may be of interest to you. And until next time, keep those portals closed and happy reading.